this. I don't know about you guys, but the last couple of days have been a challenging couple of days for me. I got sick. I don't get sick. Well, I don't want to say I was sick. All of a sudden, I felt something coming on and I started vomiting. Last night, I didn't sleep well. I woke up several times, and if you know me, I sleep like a rock. As soon as I put my head on the pillow, I'm out. But I believe that why that is happening is that it's an attack. And I know for some of you, you guys have been under attack as well, that there's something about that this message that I'm going to deliver today that the devil doesn't want you to hear. And I'm glad you're here, and you're here for a reason. And, you know, I heard someone say that there was a miracle, that there's a miracle that was here, that's in the building today. I'm another miracle. This ain't even, I'll get into the sermon, but this is just something that God put on my heart this morning is probably over almost a year ago, I got COVID. And I was dealing with it, really wasn't sick, wasn't having anything going on, but all of a sudden, my voice was taken away from me. I couldn't speak, couldn't talk, and if I did, you could barely hear me. And for me, I've always been a boisterous person. And so I began to question God, why are you doing this? What's in this? Why is this happening to me? But then I had to shift my purpose and ask God, why are you allowing this to happen? What are you trying to teach me in this moment? And I went to a doctor, and the doctor said, you got acid reflux. And I said, no, that's not right. He didn't listen to me. And so I was trying to get into the specialist, but I couldn't get into him. But how many people know that how you treat people matters? And so one of the guys that worked on my house, I drew up a friendship and a relationship and began to talk to him and his family, and turns out that his mother worked for the doctor that I needed to see. And so I got in to see him. And as you guys can tell, you know, the climax of the story is you can hear my voice. But when I went and saw this specialist, he said there's two things that I got to tell you is it's good, but one is your vocal cord is paralyzed, and two, it should resolve itself in a few months. In about 3 months. So I waited 3 months, nothing changed. He told me to come back in 2 more months, 5 months. But how many of you know when you're waiting on God and he ain't never been late, you wait differently? And so I began to wait, and I began to question, like, God, I could have swore that you said that I was going to be healed. But when it doesn't look like it's supposed to look, can you still trust him? You know, when we heard the three songs that was played today, there was a common theme, and it said trust. Can you trust him when it doesn't look the way you want it to look? And so I began to, you know, I don't know about y'all, but I tried to put it in my own hands. And I called this other doctor down in Dallas, and I was setting up an appointment, and he said, we can get you in tomorrow. But God began to say, you don't trust me. And so I waited. So I went back to the doctor, and this doctor told me, he said, hey, we got a few options for you. The first option is we can stick a needle through your throat and direct it into your voice box. And it could work, it could not work. I said, I don't want that. The second version is we can cut your throat open, and we can go in and reconstruct your voice box. I said, oh, I don't want that one either. The third option is we can cut your throat open, and we can go in and we'll put a piece of silicone over that vocal cord, and you'll be able to speak immediately. I don't want that one either. And he said the fourth option is you can wait on God. So I waited. And I waited. And I waited. And I woke up one morning, and I was talking with my wife. Hey, baby, you look good today, too. And she says, babe, your voice is back. And what's crazy is I still heard myself like I had been speaking. Hey, hey, babe, that's how I spoke. It's like I couldn't speak. And so I still heard myself like that. But God healed me. And the reason why I believe is it's because there's still some work for me to do. There's still some people I need to speak to. And so, you know, I spent my entire life wanting to be famous, and now I just want to be faithful. God, where do you want me to go? Who do you need me to speak to? You want me to come to Epicenter on Sunday? I'm there if that's what you want me to do. And so, Jamie and Iris and Alicia, Tiffany and Josh, I just would like to say all their names because every time I get around Jamie, he always acts like I don't know them or he reintroduces us several times. And so, but I just want to stand here and say, you know, Paul says in his word, he says, imitate me because I imitate Christ. And your pastor here, your pastors here, they're not perfect, but they're purposeful. At an early age for me, when my mom was in prison, my dad was gone, I was being raised by my grandma, and she's working 3 jobs, I found this man. Well, he found me, or God put him in my life. And I began to watch. And I've had a lot of people coming in and out of my life for various reasons. And they say one thing about a kid is they are sponges. So everything you do, they watch. And so I watched him very closely. He doesn't know this, but I watched him very closely. He would pick us up. He would feed us. But before we eat, he would make us pray. And another one of Pastor Crawford's traits is he can pray. I'm like, I'm just trying to eat, man. Come on. But I just watched him. I watched how he cared and loved his wife. I watched how he led his family. I watched how when things weren't going his way, what did he do? Did he crumble? Did he fall? Was this Jesus thing real? Because for majority of my life, it wasn't real for me. But I saw him. And Jamie, man, I just want to tell you, I want to be just like you. I want a wife that loves me. I want my kids. I want my kids to love Jesus as much as his kids love Jesus. And I was talking to him earlier today, and I said, man, because he said, you know, Alicia, she preaches. He said, Tiffany, she's my personal assistant. And he said, Josh, he runs the boards. They could be doing anything in the world, but they're right here serving. And if that doesn't say something about a person, I don't know what will. And I just want to thank, I got the peanut butter to my jelly in here. the milk to my Oreo cookie, the barbecue on my ribs, my wife, Jenny, and I got my two daughters, Aaliyah and Alani, in here. Stand up, girls. Say what's up. And the thing about this for me that's special is I played a lot of games on Sundays, and so I never got to be in church. We had church on Sundays or night before or early in the week, or I had to have church in my room by myself. So it's just an honor to be here. But if you guys would close your eyes and say a quick prayer. Lord, just thank you for today. Lord, I thank you for all the challenges. Lord, you say that when we're tested, man, it produces an endurance that will last. And Lord, I think when we're tested, Lord, that it's for you to make us realize that it's not in our own strength, but in your strength, God. And I just thank you for today, Lord. I thank you that they don't see me, Lord, that they see you. And Lord, I just thank you for this message. I pray that you give me a fertile soil to plant your seeds, God. And just thank you for everything, and just be with us and be with me the rest of the time I speak, God. And just thank you for everything, God. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So Jamie asked me, he said, do you have some notes? What do you want to speak about? And so I had some notes. I had some things that the key word I wanted to speak about. But you didn't come here to see what I wanted to give you. You came here to see what God had to say. And so one of my favorite people in the Bible is Paul. So in Acts 9:1, this is where I'm going to say Saul, Paul, because in the Bible it says Saul. So 9:1 it says, Paul still breathing murderous thoughts. Let me pause it there. I'm going to give you the CTLT. That is the Curtis Tremaine Lofton translation. So bear with me. It says in Acts 9:1, it says, while Paul was still breathing murderous threats against the disciples, he went to the high priest to ask for warrants to go and hunt down Christians. It calls them of the way, the early Christians of the way, and bring them back and throw them in prison. And on his way to Damascus, on the road, it says that God shone a light around him, and it knocked him to his feet. And a voice came and says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And then Saul says, who are you, Lord? And in the Bible, it doesn't say that he knows him as Lord. It was a sign of respect. It says, who are you, Lord? And it says, I am Jesus, who you have been persecuting. And then Saul gets up off the ground, and he goes in, and he has two guys with him, and they lead him to a place. And the thing that just really stood out to me was this. It says that God shone a light around him, and God doesn't do anything. Everything God does has a purpose. And I believe that he shone a light around him because he was living in darkness. And so God really began to speak to me, and he said this. He says, I'm shining a light in you because there's some darkness inside of you. There's a room that we all keep inside of us that has these things, unforgiveness. There's hate. There's trauma. There's sadness. And God's saying, I want to shine a light in there to clean all that out. It's kind of like when you're at your house and you have people coming over, and you have this room inside your house, and when somebody's coming over, you race around that house, you grab everything, and you start throwing it in there. And you close the door behind you. And so people come over, they're like, oh, man, this house is nice. It smells good. It looks good. But how many of you know if you have one room in the house that is still dirty? That one room's not cleaned, it's still dirty. And so what Paul had was an encounter with Christ. And so God shined a light on Paul, and it cleaned everything up. And in that moment, I wish God had did that for me in a moment, but it took a process. I had to go through it. So there's really three things that God calls us to do so he can use us. One, we got to have an encounter with him. Two, we need to be obedient. And three, we need to be encouragement. So when he cleaned up the room for Paul, it took another person named Ananias. You see this in Acts 10. God came to Ananias, and he calls Ananias in a dream, and Ananias says, "Here I am, Lord." Ananias knew who God was. And God told Ananias, he says, "I want you to go to this man, Saul of Tarsus, and I want you to give him back his vision." But Ananias says, "God, hold up. You want me to go see this dude who's been killing Christians and throwing them in prison?" And it's like, hold up now. And so he goes, and God says to him, he says, "That is my chosen instrument, whom will suffer much for me." It reminds me of, well, he was being obedient, but it reminds me of this. It was my daughter's birthday. Well, it was coming the next day, and, we were finishing building our house, and we were living in a rent house, and I don't know where that had been, but I was tired, and my wife called me, and she said, "Hey, will you go to Super Target?" And I was like, I will go, but I don't want to. And so, but the week before that, God had told me to go to the ATM and take some money out. And I was like, this is weird. But I always like having cash on me because we lived in New Orleans for a long time. And being in New Orleans, sometimes their card machines don't work. And so, when you're standing in the line, you got a whole card or something. And it's like, hey, the card machine's is down. What do you do? And I was like, I don't ever want to go home because I don't want to come back. I don't want to come back here. And so I was like, okay, God, you want me to take this money out? So I took it out, and I paid for something, and I put the money in my pocket, and not really thinking too much about it. So then I get to the Super Target, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm grumpy. I'm walking down, trying to find this horse that my daughter wanted. I can't find it in the toy section, and I'm just really upset that I'm there. And so, I don't know how you guys are, but for me, when I go to the lines, I always try to find the line that I can get out of there the quickest. And so I'm looking at everybody's basket. I'm not going to that one. Okay, it's between these two lines. I'm going to go over here. And so as I'm in line, God began to speak to me. And he says, "I want you to pay for this lady's stuff." I'm like, hold on, what'd you say? And, one of the biggest things that God ever did for me was, I've been fortunate and blessed to make a lot of money, but once I started tithing, it really broke my my tight grip on all my money and things, and that it doesn't belong to me, that God gave it to me, that I'm just supposed to be a steward. Wherever God tells me to do with it, that's what I'm going to do with it. And so I'm standing in line, and he says, "I want you to pay for her stuff." And she swipes the card. It doesn't work. And so I'm sitting there. We having people looking at me probably think I'm crazy because I'm like, I ain't doing this. She swipes it again, gets declined. I'm like, God, like, why? I don't want this lady to think I'm trying to hit on her. I'm married, like. And so she swipes her card again. And when she swipes it the third time, I say, no, I'm not doing it. And so she swiped this fourth time. It works. She goes on. And so I'm going up, him to do my card. I'm talking, and he says, are you going to be obedient? And I'm like, I will, God. I will. Yes, I will. And I said, if they're still out there, I will go find them. And then God flashed in my head, what the total was. It was $277. And how much money did I have in my pocket at that time? $277. And so I said, God, if they're still out there, I'm going to be obedient and do what you call me to do. And so when I walk out, first I find my car, and who's there right next to my car? So he's like, hey, I ain't giving you no chance to do nothing. You don't walk over there. And so I walk over, and I smelled a little weed smoke. And in my mind, I'm like, God, I ain't, like, they're just going to smoke this up. I don't want to give them this money. But anyways, I said, God, I'm going to be obedient. So I walked up to him, and I said, hey, I'm not strange. I'm not weird. But I'm just trying to be obedient. And God told me to give you this. And that he loves you, and that, you know, he wants what's best for you. And so the question that I'm going to ask is, how many people are waiting on you to do what God's called you to do? Because if Ananias wouldn't have been obedient to God and still went, even though he was scared, even sometimes when you're scared, you still got to go do what God's called you to do. He says, I want you to be bold in your faith, not meek, not shy, not scared. It's like, for me, I don't want to be up here. I'm scared. I don't mind running into 300-pound linemen and all those types of things, but getting on a stage, it terrifies me. But God's called me to do this, and I'm going to be obedient in what he's called me to do. And the third thing, everybody say encourage. Now, I'm just going to say that was weak. That was real weak. You know, I see some people with football jerseys on. I see some OU jerseys on. I know when OU beat Texas, I don't know about you, but I was jumping up and I was screaming, come on, baby, you know. Now, can I get some people to say encourage on 3? Hold on, we don't do it on 3. Get y'all 1, 2, 3. Encourage. Perfect. That's good. And you know, God also speaks, well, before I get to that, God also speaks to me, and he said this is, you know, for him, sometimes some of the things that we'll do is, but we won't do for him. And so I just speak for myself because I believe in being vulnerable. And God told me, he said, man, you'll get up and go work out at 5 o'clock. You'll save your money to buy new golf clubs. You'll do all these things, but why won't you do those things for me? Why won't you get up early to read your Bible? Because I know in the Bible it says that physical training is for some good, but spiritual training is for all good. All good. And so encourage. Acts 9:27, there's a dude in there called Barnabas, whose name actually means son of encouragement. And in that, the disciples, they didn't want anything to do with Paul. because they were scared of him. They didn't know if he was real. But Barnabas had seen it. So Barnabas went and he encouraged the other disciples to let Paul come into the fold. And God began to speak to me on this is the very thing that Paul was doing was killing them for. He had killed their brother Stephen earlier when they were stoning him, is now the very same thing that he wants to be a part of that they had to forgive him for. And so God began to speak to me, and he said, well, really, he gave me a flashback of this is, he asked me, he said, who do you need to encourage? Who did you need to encourage? And so I thought it was strange, and so I was sitting there, and I drive to Norman almost every day because I'm on staff at OU football, and one of the things he gave me was when I was playing, right before I was about to get married, I got a call from one of my cousins. And my cousin called me, and he said, hey, I don't know if you know this, but your father only has about a week left to live. And if I can be honest in here, I was happy. Because I said, he's finally getting what he deserved. And then God spoke to me. He said, did you get what you deserved? And so because of my faith, I had to go back and I had to check myself. And I had to really look at it. And so I decided to call my father. And I said, he answered the phone and said, man, I really got a few things for you. One, is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable? And two, I want to let you know that everything that I've been through, I don't want you to hold that against. Like, let it go. Because it made me the man I am today. Did I want to go through that? Not at all. But how many in here know that sometimes you go through some things that's really not about you? That it's about the people that's watching you to see how you go through it. And so, in the third thing, I said, man, it's more important than anything. More important than anything. I said, do you know Christ? And he said, I know him. And so I said, Dad, I said, well, man, I'm sorry that you're going through this, and I just want to tell you I love you. And so my dad told me that he loved me back. That was the first and the last time my dad ever said that to me. And at the time, I didn't understand why I needed that. It's something I've been longing for my whole life. And if my cousin wouldn't encourage me to give my dad a call, I wouldn't have got that hole in my heart filled. But at the same time, God, he had been loving me the whole time. When I was doing wrong. It's always funny for me because when I'm from Kingfisher, where I met Jamie. When I go back to Kingfisher, I was going to speak and someone said, I want to introduce Curtis. He's been loving Jesus since he was a little kid. And so when they said that, I kind of made a face, and one of my buddies sent me a text, and he's like, are they talking about the same Curtis? I said, I don't think so. And so I got up there and I said, hey, I just want to make a correction. And I said, I've been so far from God, it's not even funny. But I'm thankful that I live life without God, because when you live with him now, it's so much better. And so if I can encourage anybody today is, who do you need to encourage? Who do you need to go out of your way to find? Who in your life that's far from God? Who, maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's an enemy. Maybe it's a coach. But there's somebody that's out there that needs you. So I'm going to close it up. If there's anybody that needs to have an encounter, I'm not talking about an introduction. I'm talking about a real encounter. An introduction is, hey, I've met you, don't know your name. An encounter is, it changes everything. Everything. How you talk, the people you hang out with, the care that you give to others. Not an introduction, an encounter. God says, I don't want 10%. I don't want 30. I don't want 65. I want it all. I spent my whole life giving him 10 and 20. I spent my whole life just giving him just enough. I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to have everything and still not have enough. But when I encountered him, man, it changed everything. How I treat, how I love. So if you need to have an encounter, let's have one. 2, maybe you've had an encounter. Maybe you've been fighting to be obedient. Maybe you're scared. Somebody's waiting on you. Somebody's waiting on you to do your job. It says the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. You don't have to be up behind a pulpit to preach, to teach, to touch people's lives. You know, there's 66 books in the Bible, but there's really 67. We're the 67th book. How do you live will be more important than the words that you say. Encourage. There's a lot of people going through things. There's some people that have been going through things for a very long time. My dad I was 27. Went through 27 years of anger. Went through 27 years of unforgiveness. Don't wait 27 years. Let it go. I encourage you to.